Hey, what's up, folks? How are you? As we get ready to preview Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. It's a tight encounter. Maybe not tight for many because of how the seasons have gone. Real Madrid have only lost once this season in La Liga. Actually, Real Madrid have not lost at home since April the 8th. So well over a year that they have not lost at home. And that ends up being something that weighs heavily on Bayern Munich, a team that just in the Bundesliga season alone has lost around 10 times. And Bayern have had struggles, although Champions League ends up being a completely different monster for them. And like a lot of the things that I said about Dortmund the other day end up being valid for Bayern Munich as well. Although the obligation for Bayern might end up being a little bit greater than it is for Dortmund in some facets of discussion in terms of how they play in Champions League. This European Clasico, as they call it now, a very appealing and compelling situation for Bayern. We'll start out there first, because the possibility of not having Eric Dyer, the possibility of not having Upamecano, that ends up taking two central defenders away, so it does force Kim Min-jae to have to play as a central defender. How Bayern and Thomas Tuchel end up kind of shifting that back line around a bit will be quite interesting to see. So when you start looking at the overall standing of Bayern in the back, which is already questioned at times, well, it ends up being questioned even more in terms of how much form, how much playing time, how much consistency, how much, well, lack of erratic play will be on display. So we start out there first and foremost. Real Madrid, yeah, well, most likely everything ends up being the same. The only doubt would end up being if Tchouaméni returns to the lineup or not. If not, it ends up being Camavinga, ends up being Toni Kroos, and ends up being Federico Valverde in the midfield. Of course, up top, it ends up being Jude Bellingham in the middle with Vinicius on the left and, of course, Rodrigo on the right. So it's interesting to see how this match ends up playing out from a lot of perspectives. Bayern, of course, will end up depending a lot on Harry Kane. Will end up depending a lot on how the midfield operates and neutralizes Real Madrid, and how, well, they have to play against what Real Madrid do in order to neutralize them. So that again, I'm not saying anything that's revolutionary here, because there's nothing revolutionary really to talk about in terms of how this match can play out. There's really nothing that I'm going to be saying anything earth-shattering about it. Set plays are where a lot of the difference ends up being, because who ends up executing better in set plays? Because in the last match, it was somewhere along the lines that Real Madrid had 6 corners, Bayern had only 1, and maybe play off of set pieces ends up being key for Bayern in particular, to see how they can take advantage of certain moments. Of course, the Bernabeu can be an intimidating sight for many. I don't fall into that category. I don't think it is, but that's just one's personal opinion. It's to me a venue that the history and everything that surrounds it, all the ghosts, yeah, it can weigh upon teams in Europe. But for the most part, if there's a team in Europe that throughout history has been able to handle that, it's been Bayern. Although if you look at recent matches, well, that might not be the case, because Bayern have only won 1 out of the last 8 or 9 in their rivalry with Real Madrid in Champions League play, obviously. So it'll be one of these tales where lots of things can be determined, where lots of things can be stretched out and looked at. But the key ends up being, how does Joshua Kimmich end up dealing with Vinicius? How does no Rafael Guerreiro probably? So we'll see how that ends up also contributing to the overall. Seeing if Alphonso Davies plays, how he and Rodrigo end up pairing up or matching up, because that ends up being something interesting. Many have already talked that Alphonso Davies has kind of checked out in what is Bayern, and already looking to go to Madrid in the next couple of weeks. So there's that. there's that bit of uncertainty. There's that bit of speculation going on as well. So overall, this match, you know how tight it is. And again, I'm not using statistics. I'm using more betting trends in this one because in some situation, or depending on where you look at, Real Madrid. If you bet on Real Madrid, you get 1 point. You get 1,800 on them. So it ends up being not a bad proposition if you look at it from the perspective of, oh well, they are they're that much better, they're that much this or that much that, they are the favorites. But for a favorite at that point, well, it does say something in terms of how tight this is and how things end up being a little bit different in terms of how this match can go. Will it go penalties? That's a good question. I'm not sure. Might it go extra time? I think it might. I don't know if it'll go penalties though. It sounds kind of weird, but yeah, because usually, I don't remember the statistic, but it's very uncommon that a match that goes into extra time doesn't go into penalties. Obviously, you have to look at the exhaustion factor, the resignation of the teams of not being able to harm one another and maybe not even wanting to harm one another until they do get the penalties. So that might be another factor as well. Let's see what else. There's been just everything is out there. I mean, this is a little bit more cut and dry than how Dortmund and PSG were. Because with PSG, you knew what they had to do. You just didn't know if Dortmund was able to do what they were going to do yet again. So it wasn't as cut and dry as this one. This one, we know what both teams are going in with. We know what both teams are missing. We know what both teams have to do. We know what both teams are doing, and we know what both teams can do. So it ends up being a bit more of a cut and dry situation when it comes to Real Madrid and Bayern Munich in terms of finding out which one of the two teams ends up going to Wembley. Now, do I think Bayern Munich have a chance? Absolutely they do. They absolutely have a chance. Bayern have shown in this competition that they can hold on, they can hold the fort and defend ferociously. They can also go out on the attack and attack ferociously as well. So can they do it both in one game and be able to play against arguably one of the best teams in Europe? Maybe arguably the best team in Europe? Well, yeah, I think they can. I think they have the potential to. They have the manpower to. They just haven't been able to pull that out on a consistent basis during the entire season. And again, like I said, Champions League ends up being a completely different beast. So I'll keep this one short. It's going to be a long day. I hope that everything goes well with you. And make sure that you enjoy. I'll have a quick reaction after the match, and we'll delve into what is the final of the Champions League. And might have some cool announcements going through. So I'll talk to you very soon. Ciao.